Are bats to blame for the coronavirus crisis? We'll answer that question and more when we discuss this nocturnal creature on today's episode of the Paw Report. Stay with us.
Finding a solution for your pet's behavior problem can be confusing. Dr. Sally J. Foote helps you help your pet. Private consultation and resources are available at drsallyjfoote.com. Foote and Friends, better bond, better behavior.
Fetcher's Pet Supply on the north side of the Charleston Square, serving the EIU community since 1991. Fetcher's welcomes all pets on a leash, is open 7 days a week, and offers made in the USA food. Pet supplies for dogs, cats, reptiles, and fish. Fetcher's Pet Supply in Charleston.
The Paw Report on WEIU is supported by Rural King, America's farm and home store, livestock feed, farm equipment, pet supplies, and more. You can find your store and more information regarding Rural King at ruralking.com.
Dave's Decorating Center is a proud supporter of the Paw Report on WEIU. Dave's Decorating Center features the Mohawk Smart Strand Silk Forever Clean Carpet. Dave's Decorating Center, authorized Mohawk Color Center in Charleston.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Paw Report. We're glad you've joined us. We're also glad that we have a special guest new to the program, and her name is Tara Hofoff, and she is a bat biologist. That is right, a bat biologist. Interesting, and we're going to find out a little bit more about that. But first, thank you for joining the Paw Report. First time on the program. Yep. We're glad you're here. And as always, when we have a new guest to the segment, we'd like to hear a little bit about you and your background, and boy, oh boy, how you got kicked into bats.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Again, my name is Tara. I'm a bat biologist at the Prairie Research Institute, which is part of the University of Illinois. And I am really lucky that I get to do research and think about bats all the time. It's my full-time job. And I got into this, I got my bachelor's degree up in Winona State in Minnesota, and then I really wanted to travel out west and work different jobs out there. So I traveled out west, took different jobs with the National Park Service, Bureau of Land Management, and I ended up just keeping having experiences working with bats, and really fell in love with the work and realized how little we actually know about bats. And then I decided to do my master's here at Eastern Illinois University. Mm-hmm.
So up close and personal with bats, did you have an experience as a child or as an adult? The common one got caught in our attic flying around and you had to rescue it, or what was the encounter?
Yeah, that is funny because when I was a child, we had bats come in our house, and my mom was actually, I think, very creative about it. We needed to get them out, and so we put the movie Batman on, and we had our butterfly nets and caught them and took them outside.
Oh my.
But it wasn't a super pleasant experience. And then in college we had bats in our apartment, had to get them out. So I was actually kind of nervous my first time working with bats, but kind of once you see them up close, I feel like, and you really get a good look at them, that I think they're very cute.
Interesting way to describe them.
Yeah, whenever people say they don't think they're cute, I have to show them a lot of different photos. But I just kind of fell into it, actually. It wasn't really something I was looking for. Mm-hmm. But once I got, a few experiences with them, I really enjoyed it.
They're a nocturnal creature. You define it as cute, some would say creepy, but they do really get a bad rap. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about just the species in general. There's lots of different types of bats, weight, size, wingspan, all that good stuff.
Yes, so there is an incredible amount of diversity of species worldwide. So I've seen 1,400 to 1,600. And that number is always changing because we're finding new species all the time. Not myself, other researchers around the world. It's a number that's growing because we haven't really looked and done a lot of bat research until probably the last few decades. And so we're constantly learning more about new species, but the diversity is incredible. There's huge fruit bats that have 6-foot wingspans, and then there's bats that you probably would barely feel in your hand, very small. Here in Illinois, we have about 13 species, and those are different around, you can find them in different areas of the state. Southern Illinois has some species that are, specific to the caves and the rocky outcrops that they have down there. And then, there's some species that live up north and you can't find them in the south. So 13 species, but you can find them kind of in different areas of the state.
Speaking of species, we're going to kind of launch into a question that a lot of people have asked, that the horseshoe bat might have some connection to the situation that evolved as coronavirus in Wuhan, China. And you have some knowledge of that, if in fact it was kind of linked or related to the horseshoe bat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've definitely been trying to keep up with all the new information that we have about this connection. And we don't know, it's not a slam dunk that we know it came from bats. We do know that these bats, these horseshoe bats, carry different types of coronaviruses, and so that was kind of the easy link in why people specifically went right to bats. But when we look at the genetic information of the coronaviruses we know in the horseshoe bats versus what we know about this coronavirus, there's about a 96% match of that genetic information. And 96 seems like a lot, but in terms of DNA, it's really not a very close match. So it might be that the coronavirus, evolved and changed, and that's the one that we have now. It potentially moved to other animal species. We don't know yet. And I'm sure there's going to be continuing to be more information coming out about that. But we do know that these horseshoe bats do carry coronaviruses.
And it was also linked to these wildlife markets. Mm-hmm. That has also been in the forefront of some conversations. Can you talk about the markets and the relationship there between particularly the horseshoe bat?
Yeah, so the wildlife markets are places where people have collected different kinds of wildlife, bringing them to the market for sale, for culinary uses, medicinal uses. And the issue is, I feel like people want to put the blame on bats. But the blame really needs to lie with humans. We are bringing bats into human, markets and close to human contact. Bats would not choose to interact with humans. And so we need to look at our, the way that we do things and how we are interacting with wildlife. Bringing them in, having, animals stacked on top of each other, you're going to have this hotbed of potential for infection to spread between species and the potential to spread to humans. So, I don't want to say wildlife markets are bad. I don't want to disrespect how other people acquire food. But at the same time, we have to look very closely at these interactions and how we can make safer boundaries between wildlife and humans.
In reference to what's been termed as a spillover event in relationship to these wildlife markets, what is that, and what could be a solution?
So typically how we think about a spillover event is a lot of viruses, bacteria, they have a specific host that they are looking for or that they have evolved with, and that's the host that they're going to be successful with. A spillover event happens when, this virus is exposed to other species, humans, other animals, and it leaves that host relationship and it realizes it can be successful or it can infect another species. And so these coronaviruses, for example, may be specifically, adapted to be in bats, but then, suddenly it is spreading very rapidly in humans. And so that's something that, happens. It happens. It's happened for as long as we have interacted with wildlife. This has happened. So just something we need to be aware of, careful, and make sure we don't create these opportunities for spillover into other species.
Piggybacking off of your answer prior, so there is a likelihood that it could have been connected to one of these markets and one of these particular bats, in your opinion?
Oh, that's tricky. Possibly. But there is that, genetic difference that we can't account for. Yeah. And so there must have been something between what we know, the coronaviruses that we do know, and this specific coronavirus. So still trying to gather more information. As a scientist, I need to see the data to, make claims, and I'm, waiting for us to understand more. But I think, the main takeaway is we know that likely, it's humans who have brought these animals into contact with other humans. Also, we're continuing to take away wildlife habitat, and so we have more interactions with wildlife. And, I think we need to look really closely at what we do, our actions, and how we can minimize these risks.
And we're going to talk about that a little bit later in our discussion. I guess it sounds like a simple question, and to hear what we just talked about, I think people would say, well, yeah, but are bats really harmful to humans? I mean, just in the species world?
They're not necessarily more harmful than other species. I think we tend to interact with them more in a way because, bats can get into our houses because they're small and they can find these little cracks. As we take away habitat, we're having more interactions with bats. And what's getting to, how they can carry these types of infections and not die is that a lot of times, when an animal gets an infection, its immune system will have a really strong response. And it's actually your immune response sometimes that actually causes you to have complications and health issues because of this really powerful response of your immune system. And bats, it seems like they don't respond as extreme to some of these infections. And so they're able to survive and live with exposure to rabies or coronavirus or, some other infections. Rabies will kill bats, but it tends to, I think, persist a little bit longer. And that's how they have the ability to spread it.
Because their immune system is so strong in many of the species. Can be.
Yeah, it's the wording. Yeah, the wording. It's like their immune system actually probably weaker. They're not responding very rapidly to these infections. But yeah, it seems like something about their immune system, they can tolerate these infections. And that does give us really interesting opportunities for research. Why can they do this? What can we learn about bats and how they can survive? And, what can we learn for, in the medicine world? Like, what could we learn and help with humans and our infections?
What are some of the other misconceptions that us humans have about these creatures?
There are a lot. As a bat biologist, going out and doing outreach programs and talking to people often about bats, sometimes people surprise me with new things I didn't know were associated with bats. But I think the most common are, they're diseased and they have, they can make us sick, which, it's a very small percentage of bats. Here we worry about bats and rabies, but, it's a very small percentage of bats that actually carry rabies that you can be infected by. Basically all wild mammals you should be cautious of that can carry rabies. And then that bats are going to fly into your hair. That is, I feel like that is so common.
I'm one of those because I live in the country and I always do this number when I'm outside. But it's the bugs swarming probably around you. That
most likely, you have some insects around you and the bats are swooping really close to catch those insects. But I wonder how that got started, and it's so pervasive. I've heard that everywhere. So that's a very popular one.
We're going to switch gears just a little bit because there's a program out there that's very near and dear to you. Is the Illinois Bat Conservation Program, and that's here in the state. Can you tell us about that program and your involvement and actually what the program, its goals and what it does?
So the Illinois Bat Conservation Program was started because of not knowing a lot about our bats in Illinois. And it was our goal, and the end goal is really gathering more information about Illinois bats. And so myself and my collaborator, Dr. Mark Davis, and the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, we work very closely to, fulfill our objectives and, collect more data on bats. And that includes lots of different methods. We use acoustics, where we're actually recording bats as they fly. We're recording their echolocation pulses. And that's a really neat passive way to collect data on bats. We also go out and actually catch the bats so that we can have them in hand, ID to species. We can look if they're male or female, gather more information that way. And then we also collect DNA from their guano. And we do, all kinds of different ways that we're collecting data. And that is just to advance what we know about bats and share that information and work with IDNR and help to strategize conservation measures for bats.
Bats are very important into ecosystems worldwide. Why are they so important to Illinois?
Here in Illinois, the biggest contribution that bats are making is that they eat agricultural pests. So a study down at Southern Illinois University identified that, if they covered the corn at night so the bats couldn't pick insects off, there was a lot more damage from insects to the corn, and then it also exposed that corn to more fungal damage. And so, bats are very important here in Illinois. We have so much corn and soybean fields that, they're really helping to control the insects. And I should identify too that there's different species that will use agricultural fields for foraging, and then there's some species that are really going to avoid agricultural fields. But for us, I think, that's one of the most important. And then on top of that, bats eating mosquitoes is obviously something that we all benefit from. And I think one of our neat findings is, looking at the guano, we actually take the DNA out of the guano so that we can see what a bat has eaten. And when we looked at that genetic information, this was probably a couple years ago, one of our samples, we found a white-tailed deer and human DNA in the guano sample.
Now, when you say guano, if I can
Yes.
interrupt you, what exactly is that to the non?
So basically, bat droppings.
Okay.
We are collecting those when we're mist netting, when we actually have the bats in hand. And then we can also collect it from roost sites. So where sometimes you hear about these barns that have, hundreds of bats in them. We can collect guano samples there. But when we found this human and white-tailed deer DNA, we realized we were actually getting the DNA from the mosquito blood meal. So a bat ate a mosquito, and we were actually picking up the DNA from within the mosquito. So it was really cool. That was a really cool finding.
Right.
Yeah.
Your whole mission right now is conservation efforts and studying bats, but those conservation efforts have also been hampered through diseases that bats acquire, also from us humans, as you have alluded to a couple of different times, kind of infringing on their habitats. Can you talk about the problems that the species is, that they're encountering right now?
Yeah, historically in the United States, one of the issues with bats was just human perception. Bats actually getting killed or disturbed during hibernation in the winter. Some species were really disturbed by that. As we've advanced, right now probably the biggest threat to bat populations is white nose syndrome. It's a fungus that came to the United States in 2006, and it's just been spreading, and it's killed millions and millions of bats. It grows on them while they're hibernating in the winter, and it disturbs them, forces them to wake up, and then they actually burn through their fat stores, and there's no insects available in the winter here in Illinois, and so they actually end up dying from this fungal infection. And it only impacts species that are hibernating, and so those particular species are ones that we're really concerned about. And as we're collecting data, we're identifying some of these species that have been really hit hard by white nose syndrome.
Some of the other research or information that has been revealed to you in your studies recently, and maybe take us to the job site and what it's like. I know people are out there watching thinking, I don't know how she does that, me included, but
Yes.
take us there and walk us through kind of some of your surveying and what it's like.
Yeah. So I'll start out with the acoustics. We follow the North American Bat Monitoring Program protocol. So it sends us to random sites within Illinois so that it's statistically robust. We can't just kind of cherry pick where we want to go. It identifies a random location. We go out and try to talk to landowners and say, would you mind if we put up this bat recorder in your yard? And we actually have really good success. People think it's really neat. And we send them later data to identify what species of bats are using their backyard. Because we can take the files that are collected from the microphone and run it through a software program, and it tells us what bat species and how many times these bats pass back and forth in front of the microphone, and we recorded their calls. And then in terms of catching the bats, it's really cool, but we usually are going to find a stream or a creek because bats, a lot of times when they wake up in the evening, they're looking for a drink of water and a meal. And a lot of times near water, there's lots of bugs. And so bats are going to be using these creeks for that. And then also they can commute moving up and down these corridors. So we put up these really fine nets. They're about as fine as human hair, and they're black. And when we put them across these corridors, the bats that are, as we drive to work, we're kind of maybe not as aware.
Perky.
Yeah. Because we've been driving the same route over and over. It's just like the bats. They're using these corridors and they might not be paying as close attention, and they hit the net. They get caught. We carefully take them out really quickly. We don't want to overstress the bats. And we look at them and we identify what species it is. There's a few in Illinois that are brown and kind of look the same, so we have to look for really close features. We look at what species they are, if they're male or female, and if they're pregnant or lactating, which is really neat. And then we let them go again and they fly off. It's, they are not enjoying the situation, but sometimes you go to let them go and they won't even leave your hand. And you're like, come on.
Yeah, kind of comfortable. Well, what has it revealed about bats in Illinois? Different species. I mean, have you anything really jumped out at you about our state?
So as an example, the little brown bat used to be one of the most common bats in Illinois. It was the one that people found in their attics and barns, and they had these very big colonies of hundreds of bats. And this is a species that has been hit really hard by white nose syndrome. And we are just really not finding them on the landscape anymore. So we've been misnetting since 2016, and I think we've caught 3 in all of that misnetting. And so that really identifies to us, and something that we can tell to IDNR and to the Fish and Wildlife Service, that this is a species we really need to be concerned about. It used to be common, we used to see it everywhere, and now we just really aren't finding it. So,
in our last couple of minutes or a minute or two here, what can the general public do to assist the Illinois Bat Program? Most of us want to, like I said, whop them with a net or a broom, but probably not the best thing to do. So how can we help you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things is right now with the coronavirus, we're actually kind of limited in the field work we can do. And so we're actually looking to collect a lot more data via our roost form on our website, which is illinoisbats.org. And if you know of a barn or somewhere where there's a lot of bats, you can fill out this form, and then we will follow up and get more information from you. But we really wanted to identify where these bats are located and kind of gather information from the general public. But otherwise, just talking positively about bats. They do have a bad rap, and so spreading positive information about bats. And I think one of the best ways to have good experiences with bats is to sit outside around sunset and actually look up. People tell me all the time they've never seen a bat. And so I just encourage you to take the opportunity to look.
And, as we wrap up, they are a positive health source for our society. They can be. Like you said, they chomp on lots of mosquitoes, and that's a good thing, especially as we're recording here in the heat of the summer and humidity here in Illinois.
Yes.
Well, Tara, thank you so much for joining us. Bat biologist with the Illinois Bat Conservation Program. You light up when you talk about bats. It's great.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you, our viewers, for joining us for this episode of the Paw Report. We'll see you next time.
Dave's Decorating Center is a proud supporter of the Paw Report on WEIU. Dave's Decorating Center features the Mohawk Smart Strand Silk Forever Clean Carpet. Dave's Decorating Center, authorized Mohawk Color Center in Charleston.
The Paw Report on WEIU is supported by Rural King, America's farm and home store, livestock feed, farm equipment, pet supplies, and more. You can find your store and more information regarding Rural King at ruralking.com.
Fetcher's Pet Supply on the north side of the Charleston Square, serving the EIU community since 1991. Fetcher's welcomes all pets on a leash, is open 7 days a week, and offers made in the USA food. Pet supplies for dogs, cats, reptiles, and fish. Fetcher's Pet Supply in Charleston.
Finding a solution for your pet's behavior problem can be confusing. Dr. Sally J. Foote helps you help your pet. Private consultation and resources are available at drsallyjfoot.com. Foot and Friends, better bond, better behavior.